All right, we're back. Rachel Nichols, Fox Sports 1, All the Smoke, Monumental Sports Network.
Sports Illustrated.
Back here on the Sports Illustrated NBA podcast.
No longer in Oklahoma City?
No longer in Oklahoma City. Those Oklahoma City to Indiana trips were tough. They were as tough as I thought they were going to be. Yeah. Not a lot of great flights going to and from Oklahoma. And you always have to connect through Atlanta. Like, Atlanta, and I actually tweeted about this. When you land in Atlanta, you almost start to pray that your connecting flight is in the same terminal.
Oh, otherwise you're screwed.
Otherwise, it's like a 30-minute journey. And I had people tweeting back at me like, it's got trains there. Yeah, but it's a long walk to the trains. Then you got to wait for the trains. Then you got to walk around the next terminal. So if at all avoidable, I want to avoid the Hartsfield-Jackson Airport down in Atlanta. But it's tough to do when you're going Indy to Oklahoma City.
There you go. Do you like my Chris Mannix wear?
You do.
Do people on this podcast know of your penchant for leather jackets?
I don't wear them as much anymore now that I'm out in LA more. Yeah. I did wear leather jackets everywhere for about a decade. Yeah. I mean, I was the Kanicki of the NBA.
You were, 100%. So I'm really wearing one today in homage to you.
I appreciate that.
How I feel about you, friend.
It's like 80-something degrees outside, so I'll give you the same look people gave me.
I'm a girl. I get cold in air conditioning.
Fair enough. All right, lot to get to on this show. Recording this the day after the first round of the draft. A lot of activity I want to get into there. Also want to talk about the Kevin Durant deal. We haven't discussed that at length yet. But I want to start with Boston specifically and what the Celtics have done over the last 3 or 4 days, making the decision, which was expected, to deconstruct the championship winning team they had a little over a year ago. They trade away Drew Holiday for Anthony Simons, get some cap relief there. They trade Kristaps Porzingis to Atlanta, get back George Niang, get a lot of cap relief there. In the span of a few days, they shaved about $180 million in tax penalties off the payroll. And they may not be done. I mean, I think Sam Hauser should be on the lookout for kind of alerts with his name on his phone. But, was this kind of what you expected from Boston in the aftermath of the Jason Tatum injury? We've still got Jaylen Brown on the team. We've still got Derek White on the team. We can get into that. But what do you think of the Celtics' moves so far and what it means for them?
I think this is exactly what we expected. The shocker to me would be if they traded Jaylen Brown. If that happens, and frankly, Derek White also, but Jaylen specifically, my mouth would be hanging open and saying, you can't give up on these guys. It's just 1 year. Jason Tatum should be back. All signs indicate a guy of his age can really recover from this. To get rid of Drew Holiday, who at his age was already showing a little bit off of his defensive fastball and just a little bit of trouble staying healthy, at a high salary, and was going to, you're not playing for next year. So you're really talking about who is going to be an asset for you 2 seasons from now. And Drew Holiday, who I think is 35.
Mid-30s, yeah.
Right?
I'm not 100%.
At 37 is not going to be an asset to you 2 years from now, and especially not on that contract. So this is what we expected. I don't think Drew's very happy about it if the reporting is correct, but this is what we expected. Porzingis, same thing. If you're looking to shed salary, and they shed a significant amount of salary with that deal, there's no reason to pay second apron prices with your tax money for next season. You are not going to win a title. So you want to get rid of a contract like his. And the truth is, he was healthy for the one shining moment that the Celtics needed him to be to win the title last year, but otherwise has dealt with his usual raft of injuries, including this illness that dogged him through the spring that I don't think they've still figured out. I mean, I know he's been posting, I'm playing tennis at home and I'm healthy and whatever, but is it going to come back at some point next year? I don't know. So these are the 2 exact moves I expected. I don't expect them to trade Derek White or Jaylen Brown, but you're obviously a lot closer to the Boston Celtics. What are you hearing?
Yeah, on Holiday and Porzingis, I thought they did an outstanding job of doing what they had to do with those guys. There was a school of thought amongst NBA types that the Celtics might have to attach some draft capital to Drew Holiday because the 3 years left in his contract were for big money. And to your point, there has been a level of regression, all-around regression. The shot making wasn't there last year either, so there was some thought that they'd have to do that. They didn't. They got a much better contract long-term, and Anthony Simons could take a flyer on him. I don't think he's long for the Celtics, be it before the start of this season and another deal or end of the season. And then the Porzingis deal was solid too. I mean, they found a good trading partner in Atlanta that is looking to make one more run with Trae Young, and they get a nice compliment to Trae Young and Kristaps Porzingis. So I thought the Celtics get an A for doing what they had to do up until this point. I hope that's all that they do, because I think trading Jaylen Brown, and to a lesser degree, but still Derek White, would be a mistake.
Totally agree.
Jaylen Brown is still an all-NBA caliber swingman. He is just a year removed from being conference finals MVP and finals MVP. If you trade Jaylen Brown, you can probably get back some real assets in return. There was some speculation about San Antonio. Would the Spurs give up number 2? You can get Dylan Harper. A lot of people high on Dylan Harper. But if you trade Jaylen Brown, you're going to spend the next 3 years trying to find Jaylen Brown. And if Jason Tatum was 22 years old, I might be able to wrap my head around that. But Jason Tatum is going to be, 27 when he comes back?
They are on Jason Tatum's timeline.
And you have to surround him with the right kind of talent. So, you fast forward through this year. And look, I don't think the Celtics really care if, I've heard people say, like, they don't want to be that bad. Why wouldn't they? They have their own draft pick next year. If they can get under the luxury tax, that frees up all kinds of flexibility for what they can do in the summer of 2026 when Tatum is coming back and they can be at full strength once again. If they can go into the 26-27 season with a core of Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Derek White, that's pretty good. You still have to find the pieces around them, and maybe you do, as Brad Stevens suggests this week, you take a page out of the Oklahoma City and Indiana playbook, try to find some young guys who play fast, aggressive, kind of modernize with the game. But trading Jaylen Brown made no sense. The suggestion of it made no sense unless you got the kind of offer that was simply too good to refuse, and I don't think those offers were out there.
I'm not sure what that would be, again, because you have Jason Tatum.
Yeah.
None of these trades are in a vacuum, right? So what might be a great offer for one team is not necessarily a great offer for the other. And for the Boston Celtics, they need compliments to Jason Tatum. They do not need a child coming out of college who will take usually, 3 years to mature. I'm fighting with a very serious siren
It's
here
Los
in
Angeles.
LA.
You got to have to deal with that. You got to power through it. You got to power through it.
They don't need a child who is just, a year out of college and learning the NBA, and normally takes about 3 years to mature, and you never know what these guys are going to turn into. I'm curious what their intentions are for next season, only in that it's so wide open. And we've had this catastrophic injury, not only on their team, but now to Tyrese Halliburton as well. So the Pacers should be generally off the board as championship contenders, or they're going to come out of the East contenders. We're not going to talk about them like that with Tyrese out. So where is that soft middle of the Eastern Conference going to be? Where could they end up? The Simons acquisition is interesting to me because he launches a lot of threes, and he does that very well, and he can create his own threes, which is something Tatum
gives
did.
up a lot of threes too.
And well, I'm getting there. Come on, I'm getting there. I'm being
sorry.
positive first.
I immediately have to go to that.
But he fills that hole for them in a really nice way on a team where obviously the strategy is shoot as many threes as humanly possible that you can stuff into a 48-minute basketball game. On the other side, as you may mention, I believe he is rated as one of the league's worst defenders when you start adding in all the advanced stats. So obviously that had been a long-time strength of the Celtics team. They could defend at every position. Mm-hmm. They're not going to be able to say that anymore. But still having 4 guys who can defend, I think, puts them ahead of, say, the Knicks starting lineup right now, where they still have 2 guys, one through his size and not his own fault, and the other we're still trying to figure out who, maybe targets. So I still think it puts them in a decent position, and I'm curious what their intentions are for next season. And it might just be, let's see how it goes, right?
I think, look, there are teams that are obviously better than them. I think Cleveland is obviously better than them. New York, to me, is obviously better than them. I agree. Orlando, I think, is better than them with Desmond Bane in that mix to improve the offense. I can see the Celtics finishing anywhere from 5th to 9th, depending on injuries. I think their ceiling is probably getting to the second round of the playoffs and probably getting beat in a competitive series. But next year, the way they're operating, next year is just whatever. Like it's more about keeping the books clean and keeping the finances in place. And look, we're talking about what their rotation could look like. I don't know if Al Horford's going to be back. Before we came in here, we were talking about free agency, and free agency is not shaping up to look like it's going to be as interesting as it's been in years past. But I think Al Horford is potentially one of the most interesting free agents that's out there on the board. I mean, how many teams would benefit from an Al Horford? The Knicks would love to get their hands on an Al Horford.
Yep.
San Antonio would love to get their hands on Al Horford. The Lakers would love to get their hands on Al Horford. And Al Horford's not going to be particularly expensive. Al Horford is, 39 years old. He's coming off a contract that paid him $10 million per year over the last 2 years.
Yep.
He's not going to be a pricey free agent acquisition now. And if I'm Al Horford, I'm comfortable in Boston, no doubt about it. But do I want to spend one of the final years of my career on a team that's just not going anywhere and is kind of waiting to reset in the summer of 2027? If I'm Al Horford, I'm looking around and I'm seeing what the best offer and the best situation is out there. I mean, no joke, 2/3 of the league would probably love to get their hands on Al Horford, and all those teams can probably afford to make him an offer that could be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, pick where you'd like to live, Al Horford. Pick who you'd like to be your teammate. I don't even think it necessarily has to be about where he's best able to win a championship because he finally won his title, right? It's always nice to have another one, but if you are going to pick where you most likely end your career in your 40th year on Earth, to have that kind of flexibility to say where, to say when, to say with who is pretty great. And he deserves that.
Hey, hop on that Amtrak, go up to New York. Celtics fans would hate it, but you already went to Philly. Down. I keep getting my geography wrong. Down to New York. You already went down to Philly.
Well, by the way, you did not mention Philadelphia in your Eastern Conference. Have you just written them off completely?
I don't know. I mean, we can get into the Six if you want. I was not a fan of VJ Edgecombe being drafted that high. He's athletic. I get that. He's an excellent defender, but his shooting numbers at Baylor were kind of meh. I don't look at him as a great shot creator. I just think there's an offensive ceiling to him. And he's 6'4", so is he Dwayne Wade? That'd be great if he turns out to be, but he's kind of one of those smallish two guards who I have not seen enough of him as a shot creator to be sure that he's the real deal. Ace Bailey, who we're going to get to in a minute, he's a shot creator. He might have a lot of other problems, probably does, but he's a shot creator. I didn't see that from VJ Edgecombe.
I was thrilled that the Sixers passed on Ace Bailey, who, by the way, he could be the perfect citizen in the NBA. It could turn out Ace Bailey had one bad, month, however, leading into the draft, of bad advice. Turns out to be charming, wonderful, a great teammate, a leader. I do not know. I am not in any way, saying that he has a character problem, because we've only seen a month of something concerning, and that's not enough. However, if there is any team that should not be gambling on a guy who may be an internal problem, it is the Philadelphia 76ers. They have enough problems, Chris. They want a guy like Edgecombe who is not only a good teammate, but this is a guy who took his NIL money and used it not for himself, but to give kids in the Bahamas scholarships to come to the States to learn at the academy that he graduated from. This is a guy who puts his teammates and other people first. And in that Sixers locker room, that is not what we saw this past year. So to bring a culture guy like that in, who I think has a lot of upside, guys get taught to shoot in the NBA all the time. I think that was another factor going on. But what about Ace Bailey? Are you happy with him in Utah?
Just to put a button.
Are you happier than he was in Utah?
Just to put a button on Edge. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
Clearly. I don't know how high
You're
up.
but I don't care.
I don't know how high up that would be on my criteria of drafting someone with the third overall pick.
I'm just saying if you're choosing between those two guys.
I'm not even talking about that. I'm actually more surprised they kept it.
Yes. Well,
Daryl must have been losing his mind.
I think they explored not keeping it.
That's a team with a 2-year window. Joel Embiid, let's just assume that they bring the band back for next year. Joel Embiid, Paul George, Tyrese Maxey's younger, but that's a 2-year window. I'm surprised. VJ Edgecombe was a freshman, just coming out. He's going to need there's a learning curve there under the best of circumstances. I don't know. I didn't like that pick. I think that's going to bite them. All right, you mentioned Ace Bailey. This is where the draft got really interesting. Ace Bailey, who has had a hell of a couple of weeks, the Rutgers freshman, elected not to work out for any teams. I believe that was the first time ever that a U.S.-born player, a U.S. prospect, has not worked out for any teams before the draft. It was believed coming into the draft that Bailey wanted to stay in kind of that Northeast corridor. He was looking at Washington. He was looking at Brooklyn. Those two teams drafted 6th and 8th. He did not work out for the Utah Jazz. Jonathan Givony over at ESPN, who's the most plugged-in guy that I know on these college prospects, he said that Utah was not his preferred destination or one of his preferred destinations. But Utah said, you know what? I don't give a shit. I don't care. I am drafting Ace Bailey because we need someone like Ace Bailey. What did you think of how Bailey handled the draft process and Utah taking him kind of sight unseen in this draft?
It's one thing not to go work out for people, and his agent's point was, hey, he worked out for everyone at the combine, and everyone got the chance to
which
talk
his
to him.
agent should know is not the same thing.
Which is definitely not the same thing. It's another thing to cancel on teams, which is what he did, schedule workouts and then cancel them. It's another thing to have it out there that, oh, I prefer this destination, I prefer that destination. And by the way, if that's bad reporting, you could come out and say, hey, hi, I'm Ace Bailey. I'm on social media. I'm telling you guys right now, I have a direct line to all of you people, which didn't exist 20 years ago. That is not true. I don't have that. Nobody ever did that. So that makes me tend to believe that, in fact, he did have preferred destinations, which is not something I think sits well in this league when you're a rookie. So I don't think it was good advice. I'm not sure how staying in the Northeast qualifies to also have the Pelicans on your list, which was one of his, quote, preferred destinations.
I mean, I guess they're like, when it comes to Western Conference teams, they're one of the most easternmost Western Conference teams. I don't know. I'm just making it up at that point.
Absolutely no sense. I mean, one thing I read, and again, because we didn't hear from him directly on this, setting any sort of record straight, one thing I read reporting was, he wants to where he can just jack up a lot of shots. I mean, I don't know.
What's wrong with Utah? He can jack up a lot of shots there.
Again, a lot of it does. The same thing with the Northeast corridor. A lot of it doesn't make sense when you put it all together. Again, he could be a great kid, a great leader, and this could end up being a blip that we all laugh about later. I'm not willing to sentence him to anything based on getting advice from an agent on your way into the draft. But I do think that he now has a little bit extra to prove to people about being a good teammate, about being a leader, about being someone who is hungry and a sponge and ready to learn and ready to play your role, and all the things that are valued for rookies in this league, because he's walking in with not a great reputation because of the last 4 to 6 weeks.
This did feel kind of amateurish how it was all handled. Mm-hmm. And we have to acknowledge that Ace Bailey has a young agent, a new agent that he works with as his representation. He's not represented by a Rich Paul or a Bill Duffy or a Jeff Schwartz, the powerhouse agents that do stuff like this. Look, maneuvering to one team is not a new concept. I mean, guys get promises all the time. They shut down workouts and they try to steer themselves to that destination. But how Ace Bailey did it felt kind of ham-handed, and it felt kind of amateurish.
Also, it's one thing to steer your way in certain circumstances. The bottom line is the NBA, that team that drafts you has your right for 7 years. 7 years. So it's not like you can go be a problem somewhere. A veteran on an expiring contract, you can guide yourself to certain teams. Or a guy like Kevin Durant, who the question was, would he sign an extension and therefore should we give step up for them? You can guide yourself to certain teams, even if technically you don't have a no-trade clause or you don't control your own rights. You have influence. With these kids coming into the draft, they have no influence. That team has your rights for 7 years. So steering yourself as a rookie, I just think it's a mistake. I think that it's a reputation mistake. I think it's a mistake he can 100% get over, but I just think the bar is a little higher for him now to prove himself.
Yeah, and he hasn't done anything catastrophic here. Mm-hmm. And even in his interviews, he didn't really say a heck of a lot, but he didn't say, I don't want to go to Utah. So that he's got that going for him.
That would be awkward.
I think once he gets to Utah and starts working with that staff, led by Will Hardy, who's one of the best head coaches, I think, in the NBA. I think he's going to really like the circumstances that he's in. And I'll give Utah a lot of credit here. The easy thing to do would have been to pass on Ace Bailey and draft someone like, say, Jeremiah Fears. Like, they drafted a point guard later in the draft anyway. They could have taken the 18-year-old Fears, good prospect out of Oklahoma. A lot of people I've talked to think he has a really high upside 2-3 years down the road. That would have been probably the easy thing to do. Ace Bailey, though, is the big swing. When you look at the Jazz roster, like, who are the shot makers there? They just don't have them. Like, Lauri Markkanen is kind of that guy, but who knows how long Lauri Markkanen is for Utah. They dangled him in trade talks last year, almost had a deal done with Golden State. Maybe they do it again this summer because Lauri, even though he's not old, doesn't really match the timeline of this team, the Keontae Georges and Isaiah Colliers and all the guys that they've drafted over the last couple of years. They need a bona fide shot maker. And Ace Bailey showed me last year at Rutgers he is a bona fide shot maker. Like, you can kind of squint, Rachel, and see those shades of Kevin Durant. Like, you can see it. Like, he's a couple inches shorter, maybe not quite as dynamic, but I can see the shot making there. He shoots the three really fluently. He shoots it. Yeah, it's just everything about his offensive game just looks like it's going to progress really well. He was just a freshman last year. You give this guy a couple of years, I can see him becoming an all-star level scorer in the NBA. We'll see how the rest of his game develops. I don't know. But I can see this guy becoming that kind of scorer, and that's exactly what Utah needs. They have been desperate to go and get that type of player. And look, I don't know exactly, if we're being honest, who is making the final decisions in Utah right now. Austin Ainge was just hired as the president of basketball operations. Justin Zanuck is still there. Danny Ainge, I don't know what he's doing between, 18 holes at Pebble Beach. Like, is he having the final say on these draft picks? But something about Danny Ainge, and look, Austin to a degree too, because he was part of this. When the Celtics drafted Jason Tatum back in 2017, Jason Tatum did not want to go to Boston. Jason Tatum was hoping that he slipped one more pick and went to the Phoenix Suns. Danny Ainge, who had already done a deal, already did the Markelle Fultz deal, moved out of the first overall pick to get to 3, didn't give a damn. Was like, you know what? Doesn't want to play here? I don't care. You're coming to play here. I had that same kind of vibe with Ace Bailey. Who knows if it's going to work out, but the Tatum thing worked out pretty well, and now here he is with maybe a Tatum-esque type of player who can be the face of your franchise.
Yeah. And look, for them, it's a win because, as you say, he's evaluated as a top 3 talent, and they got him sitting lower on the board. This is a team that felt like they got not cheated out of the lottery system. I don't want to use that word, but sort of, the ultimate bad luck and possibly an idea of, hey, maybe we need to fix the lottery system. Utah and Washington have been beating the drum for that the most. And yet they didn't make it into that top 3, and they got a top 3 talent. So let's see what he can do. Again, I just think he's got to prove himself a little bit more in the off-court areas than he would have had to 6 weeks ago. But I also think he can do it.
All right, let's talk about a team that has had a very weird couple of days. And
I know who you're going to say.
That is the New Orleans Pelicans.
Ding, 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 ding.
They have had a very strange early run in the Joe Dumars, Troy Weaver era in New Orleans. To recap, a couple of days ago, they acquired Jordan Poole and Sadiq Bey from the Washington Wizards for C.J. McCollum and Kelly Olynyk. The Wizards' reasons for acquiring those guys was pretty easy. Those guys, their contract comes off the books next year, and they could have as much as $100 million in cap space in the summer of 2026. I get it from the Wizards' perspective. Jordan Poole, though, has a fat contract and an inefficient game. Sadiq Bey didn't play last year, recovering from an ACL injury. Showed some flashes before then of being a decent player. So they do that deal, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess you did want to shake things up around Zion. Even David Griffin was talking about that the last couple of years. So there you go, you can do with that. Then you get to draft night, and they draft with the 7th pick, Jeremiah Fears. I actually like that pick. Again, I think Fears has a long runway, but 3 years from now, when he's 21 years old, he could be a franchise point guard. Like, he's that young, but I think the talent in him is real. The next decision they make is to trade up from the 23rd pick, which they held, to the 13th overall pick. They traded up 10 spots to draft Derek Queen. The cost was that 23rd overall pick and a 2026 first-round pick, which is the better of the 2 picks between the Pelicans and the Milwaukee Bucks, 2 teams that have very shaky short-term futures. That pick, here's how one executive described that pick to me. He said, quote, they traded away one of the 5 most valuable draft picks in the entire league across all years from 2026 to 2032 to move up 10 spots. That is a huge price to pay. They also drafted Derek Queen. I'm not a fan of Derek Queen. I've watched him, and I've talked to other teams about him. He has as much variance, I think, as any player that was drafted in the lottery. Like, you can look at Derek Queen, and you can see a guy with great hands, great footwork, developing into kind of that combo forward center in the modern NBA. But he's not an efficient shooter. He has an incredibly slow release. He's like the Tim Tebow of the NBA. Like, his release is really slow, and he just doesn't have great size. Like, he's not a big guy. And I'm looking at Derek Queen, I'm like, him next to Zion, how does that work? Did Troy Weaver like him because he played at Maryland? Like, I don't know. I couldn't forget the fact. I mean, I guess you can't forget the fact that traded away the 2026 pick, because that's the big part of all this. But they move up 10 spots to draft Derek Queen, and they give away a pick that could turn out to be the number 1 pick overall in next year's draft, which is projected to be really damn good, especially at the top.
But you're missing one word when you describe this: unprotected.
Yeah.
They gave it away unprotected into what is supposed to be this year, next year, is supposed to be 2 of the best drafts of this era. I don't understand it. And I am not a college basketball expert. I always cede to the guys who scout all year when it comes to the draft. But in a lot of those reports from the guys who scout all year, there have been some red flags about conditioning. Is that who you want to draft if you're the New Orleans Pelicans and you've got the Zion problem and you're in a city that does not do great for people's conditioning because of all the food there? The thing to come back to, though, is unprotected pick. I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense. Our friend Zach Lowe had an interesting theory. Bryson Graham, who used to be in that front office and overlapped a little bit after David Griffin when Joe Dumars came in, that he went to Atlanta and he had sort of some inside intel on who Joe was looking for and able to help work part of that deal.
Smart.
I don't know if that's true, but I like that Zach Lowe theory. It doesn't make sense, though. Even if somebody wants you to do something dumb, frankly, there's no reason you have to do it.
Austin Ainge calling Boston and be like, I know that Jalen and Jason aren't the best of friends.
Right.
Maybe you
should give us Jaylen Brown. Right.
We'll
you don't have to do it.
We'll give you Lowry.
Right. You don't have to do it.
And a top 20 protected first.
I just, I am a big Joe Dumars fan personally. I think he likes some of those old school feel players, and I think Derek has a little bit of that. But this is a huge mystery. I absolutely think giving away that pick will come back to bite them. I absolutely think it's going to end up being a great pick. And it is, in this day and age, where everything is just analyzed to the last decimal of a decimal of a decimal, and where the owners have created rules that they can't spend their way out of problems by creating 18 aprons, and they've limited trades so you can't compound salaries, and making trades can be more difficult. What you have is drafting, and giving away one of those picks, including an unprotected possible number 1 pick, is absolute insanity. There's no excuse for it.
It's nuts, and I'm trying to pull up the Western Conference standings on my iPad right now.
You're not winning anything.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You look at the Western Conference next year. Like, do you have New Orleans in your top 10?
No.
In the Western Conference?
No.
I don't. The Bucks, a month from now, the Bucks could be rebuilding. Like, they could be trading Giannis. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, but one of those 2 picks is going to be really good.
Yeah.
One of those 2 picks, is going to be in the lottery room. And what have we seen in that lottery room over the last few years? If there's no overhaul to the system, and I don't think there's going to be, not in the short term, you're talking about a pretty decent chance that the owner of that pick jumps up in the lottery. I mean, I thought Atlanta had an excellent couple of days.
Yeah.
You go and get Porzingis. You got to give up a little bit of talent, a draft pick, but you get a guy on an expiring contract. You can take one more swing with this Trae Young-led team before choosing to do something else. If you decide to do something else, you got maybe the number 1 overall pick next year, or a top 5 pick next year. Great deals by the Atlanta Hawks. The Pelicans, I don't know what Joe's doing down there. I don't get it. I just don't get the thought process of bringing in Jordan Poole. Like, what? Like, Jordan Poole kind of sort of, I mean, he did help them win a title in 2022. He was part of that mix, but has not shown anything really in Washington besides durability. He's a durable guy. I don't get it. I don't get the Pelicans' last couple of days.
We've been in the transaction era. Fans never used to follow transactions as closely as we have over the last 5-7 years. So we've been in that era anyway. I think because of the limitations I just mentioned from the CBA and all of the restrictions, I just think the role of the front office just continues to grow. And whether your team wins a title depends more on how savvy your front office is than it ever has before in the NBA. And we are starting to see what those differences are, and differences that may have read in the past as like, that wasn't a great decision, that seems like a better decision. Now that we do all minutely analyze every decision these guys make, because we have to, because it is the future of their team, we are seeing where some of the cracks and fissures are, and this is one I don't get.
Yeah, I don't get it either. Let's talk about the strangest pick of the first round of this draft. Portland sitting there at, number 16 in the draft. They come up on the board, and Adam Silver gets to the podium and says the Blazers have selected Young Hansen. And I got to tell you, Rachel, I've tried to be somewhat plugged in to the draft process. I had absolutely no idea.
You hadn't been crushing film on him?
Have not been crushing film on Young Hansen. 20 years old. I think it was Jake Fisher that described him as the Chinese Nikola Jokic. I watched a little bit of film of him. Like, he's coordinated for sure, and he's got some moves in the low post. But when I texted other executives about Young, there were a lot that said that they liked him, but they liked him as a second-round pick.
Oh.
There were a couple that said, like, I can see him becoming a really good career backup in the NBA. And the Blazers grab him in the first round. Now, the Blazers scouting department is led by Mike Schmitz, who I used to work with over at Yahoo. Really smart guy. One of the brightest scouting minds that I've been around, and excels at scouting internationally. All over the globe, this guy goes and watches talent. He obviously sees something in Young, but to draft him in the middle of the first round on a team that just last year drafted Donovan Clingan, that still has DeAndre Ayton and Robert Williams III on the roster, I don't know. I mean, I feel like, could that draft capital not been utilized on someone that made a little bit more sense?
Or trade down. If this is who you're going to draft,
well, that's,
you have no competition. I promise you, there was nobody else in any front office around the NBA being like, oh man, we missed out on Young. Ugh, I can't believe Portland went and nailed and snatched him up. Like, there's nobody who was competing with them for that. And I just, again, I'm like you. I'm just reading scouting reports on him because who has seen him play? But the scouting reports are that yes, he's a great passer. Some flares of Jokic, but although Jokic is possibly the best passing big man ever in the history of the game. So the likelihood that you have found the next one is not likely. Someone might be good in that mold, but they're not going to be Nikola Jokic. And then there's a bunch of questions about his athleticism, his explosiveness. And it's not the sort of knock on Nikola, which was, he's a little overweight, he's a little pudgy, I don't know how committed he is. This is the way this guy's body is constructed, is not necessarily an NBA frame. And the explosiveness, we don't see it being there. So if those are the knocks that the scouts have seen who have seen him play, that's what they highlight. Again, you didn't need to get him at that spot. And if it is who you wanted, if you're Kevin Costner and it's him or no one, at least trade down and get something out of the fact that you are taking this risk that nobody else wants to take.
I'm just watching that clip over and over again. You see him struggling to button up that cream-colored suit. And look, this was a great moment for Rich Paul. Great moment for Rich Paul. Rich Paul set himself up to be the go-to agent for all Asian basketball players. If you are an unknown basketball player, Rich Paul...
Look what I got him.
Got this guy.
Look what I got him.
Who nobody had projected the first round.
Sign
drafted
with me.
In the middle of the first round. That comes with guaranteed money.
Yep.
Like, he's going to get...
Money's real.
3-year, 4-year deal.
By the way, the endorsements this guy
thing.
is going to get, that I assume Clutch will get a piece of, is going to be huge. If you have spent any time around any Chinese basketball player or even player who is popular in China, I've spent a long time working with Tracy McGrady, let me tell you how much endorsement money is out there on the most populous country in the world. And that will all be there now because he is a legitimate NBA player. And so no matter how good or not good he turns out to be, he's in the NBA, he will get endorsement deals.
Now, I don't even know where the Blazers go from here, though. Like, you draft Clingan, who was a dominant college basketball player. You get him in the top 10 in last year's draft. I mean, Robert Williams is definitely in play. If he can prove that he's healthy somebody's going to want him. DeAndre Ayton's still got a big contract. I don't know what the market's going to look like for him. They now have a glut of, high-level big men, high-level, and not even big men, because they're all centers. Like, they're not versatile players. They're all guys that really only play the five. They're going to have to do something with that logjam in the middle. And this is like, for Mike Schmitz, it's a big swing, man. It's a big risk to take. Like, you may have just drafted the next Nikola Jokic, like we've been talking, but you also may have just drafted Chinese Bruno Caboclo, right? You may
We'll
be.
see. Yeah.
Like,
I mean, look, more power to them if it turns out.
Yeah, that was the wildest pick. Another team that I thought was had an interesting night, and that was the Phoenix Suns, who have had an interesting couple of years. They continue to bumfuzzle me at times with some of their moves. So at the 10th overall pick, the Suns select from Duke, Kaman Maluach. Good player, picked up basketball pretty late, so he's just kind of coming into the game. Had a good year last year at Duke. People like his tools, his potential to continue to grow. Around the exact same time, they do a deal to get Mark Williams, the center out of Charlotte. So now, and they give up a 2029 first-round pick to get Mark Williams. So now they have Mark Williams, they have Maluach, they have Nick Richards, who I think is still there, and I'm blanking on the. I don't want to mispronounce his last name. But they have one more big man that's in that mix.
Remember when Phoenix had like 8 point guards?
When did centers become like this thing again? Like, when did like pivots even like I was watching a little bit of the ABC draft coverage, and Bob Myers, who is loath to criticize anybody in those situations, Bob is very positive all the time. Even Bob was like, like centers who are the easiest guys in the league to play off the floor, right? Like, we've seen it happen over and over again in the postseason. Like, even like in the championship team, the Oklahoma City Thunder, Isaiah Hartenstein did not start for the first few games of the NBA Finals because the Thunder want to play down. You're going to grab 2 of them who both have questions around them. Like, Maluach is such an impressive kid to like show up at an NBA academy in Africa and turn into what he's turned into. Similar with like VJ Edgecombe, I'm not sold on the story. Like, the story doesn't do a lot for me when I'm talking about using a top 10 pick.
Cold heart.
It's a top 10 pick. I'm talking about a top 10 pick, Rachel.
Cold.
Like, you're using a top 10 pick
Cold.
on Maluach. I don't know what his offensive ceiling is. I think he can be a good defender. I don't know what his offensive ceiling is going to be. Mark Williams put up numbers with Charlotte, but something was going on with him physically that made the Lakers, who were desperate for a player the ilk of Mark Williams, to veto the trade, to rescind the trade for Mark Williams. So now you've got the Suns. I wrote this in SI.com. The Suns' perception of what they are. Like, you put the Suns' perception of what they are right here.
Oh, it's very different from the reality.
It's very different from what they are. Like, in the Suns' mind.
Wait, move your hands, because they're not. Right now, for people who aren't watching on YouTube, Chris's hands were right next to each other, and they should not be.
They're not, yeah. Like, all right, we'll make a bigger gap. Just spread your hands out wide. The Suns believe that they add Mark Williams and Maluach to a team with Jalen Green, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal, and whatever stuff they have there, Grayson Allen, that they're a playoff contender next year. We just did this thought experiment with the Pelicans as a playoff team next year. Do you have the Phoenix Suns in your playoff field
Are
next
you
year?
playing point guard for the...
No.
Because that's another big question I have. Again, I made the joke because it was, I got this point. Isaiah Thomas is who I'm talking about, and that glut of point guards. So it was, 10 years ago?
Yeah.
But that's the team that stacked up on 3 starters at the same position. And now here we are again having this conversation. And, I do think big men have sort of revived at being, more valuable in the NBA stratosphere, but you cannot just sort of throw them out on the floor the way you can with wing and backcourt players and say, you guys will figure out how to play together. It does not make sense. And Mark Williams, there's got to be something going on there, because Charlotte has been trying to get rid of him, we now know, for 6 to 8 months.
Yes.
Actively.
Injury issues have plagued him. And the Hornets, who by the way, the Hornets are like this fun, springy team. LaMelo, Brandon Miller, you add Con Knipple to that mix. Like, theoretically, you've got your outside shooter. What you need now is kind of that shot-blocking big man that Mark Williams would seem to be. But the Hornets have done everything in their power to get away from this guy, to move him, and to not be in a position to pay him.
Now, I did read a couple places on the internet, people talking about the Suns getting the Lakers sloppy seconds, and that's not right. We should not be talking about him that way. But I do. Look, again, wish him the best, hopefully. I felt it was rough what happened with that Lakers trade, because regardless of whether it was his physical fault or whether it was Charlotte's fault or whether it was the Lakers' fault for having a change of heart, you get kind of just sort of marked when the team says they don't want you back. So I hope he's somewhere, and clearly Charlotte has continued to try to get rid of him. So I hope for his sake he's somewhere where he flourishes, but it is, again, a perplexing move from the Phoenix Suns.
But Malawach, like this, I keep going back to Malawach here. And I wrote this, like I had heard immediately after they made that pick, they were dangling him in trades to other teams so that they were looking to maybe move off him. Like they're trying, again, this goes back to the perception versus the reality. Like they're trying to be a winner. Like everything that Matt Ishbia says, we're going to build a win around Devin Booker. We're going to win a championship with Devin Booker. I've said this to you and I've said to many other people. There is a 0.0% chance that Devin Booker wins a championship in Phoenix. Not that Devin Booker won't win a championship. Great player, probably will. But it will not be with the Phoenix Suns. Now you draft a player in Malawach who is both young and has not been playing basketball for more than, 5 years. It's going to take him time to reach whatever potential that he's ultimately going to get to. I don't get it. I don't get what the thinking is in Phoenix. I don't get what the strategy is in Phoenix. I don't know Brian Gregory at all. Not vastly experienced in the general manager position. They've got a young head coach. Obviously, Jordan Ott's got a lot going for him. Was on that Kenny Atkinson staff. And I have said it many times, I love when these kind of coaches get these type of opportunities. But they are a team that on Monday is acting like it is preparing to rebuild. And then Friday, acting like it's preparing to compete for a championship. That makes no sense to me.
New owner syndrome. New owner syndrome.
It's been like 3 years now, though.
He's clearly still got it.
He's still got it.
I'm just saying. And look, Malawach, I hope also turns out to be great because his story is inspiring. Thank you very much, heartless Chris Mannix. But
inspiring doesn't.
I do always wonder when you play with a player the caliber that Cooper Flagg is supposed to be, how much is he making everyone on that Duke team?
How many first-round picks they have? They have 2 top 4 picks there.
But that's what I mean.
Yeah, I know.
Is that I'm curious to see him in a Cooper Flaggless universe, and what kind of player he is then.
So as you probably figured out by now, we are not draft nicks per se. We are not crunching the tape, nor are we diving
deep. We're good
deep.
at contextualizing these draft picks, because we know the league.
But we can have opinions on potential steals of this draft. So I want to talk about that. I want to get your take on who the potential steal is. And I'll give mine first. I'll go mine off the bat. I was very high coming into the draft on Kasparis Yakachonis. Played for Illinois.
Easy for you to say.
I rehearsed that several times to make sure I got it right.
Yeah.
I did a mock draft back in April, the only mock draft that I did. I had him at 4. I thought he was that good. He's a 6'6" point guard who's got a lot of flair to his game. He commits a million turnovers. Like, he is a turnover machine, but he has the playmaking and he has the skills and he has the moxie that if you can just kind of harness that talent and mold that talent, you can get a starting point guard in today's NBA, and a high-level starting point guard. He falls all the way to 20. I was shocked that he fell as far as he did. He falls to 20, and he falls to the team that historically has been able to provide the kind of structure that I think he's looking for. He's going to get a coach and a coaching staff and Eric Spoelstra and the guys in Miami that are going to develop him the right way. I loved Yakachonis in Miami. I think 3-4 years from now, we're talking about him, if you do a redraft, being inside the top 5 or 6.
You know who can fix a turnover problem? Eric Spoelstra.
Yeah.
There's no question in my mind that if that is one of his big issues, that will get beaten out of him with the Miami Heat. And look, Miami elects not to make the Kevin Durant trade, and I actually think there was some merit to their decision not to do that. They were not a Kevin Durant away from an NBA championship, and you talk about the Suns not having a realistic view of who they were, and I think this was the Heat having a realistic view of what assets were smart to keep, to try to build more slowly than just, okay, who can we get this year, or scramble for a 37-year-old. So I'm intrigued to hear that you think this guy is 15 places or 16 places.
It's got like
from where he's supposed to be.
there's like some shades of Ricky Rubio to his game. And I say that in a complimentary way. Like, and I think he can become a better shooter than Ricky Rubio was. And the thing that kept Ricky from being an all-star was a lack of shooting. If this kid, if Yakachonis can turn into a reliable three-point shooter, I'm telling you, there's a star quality to him.
And they need that offense,
Yeah,
so
no doubt.
that's good. Can I give you my very Washington, D.C. centered take?
Absolutely.
Excellent. My hometown bias is coming through. I think that Georgetown's own,
Ooh, I know where you're going.
yeah, Mr. Sorber,
Yeah, and guess where he went?
to the Oklahoma City Thunder, who know a thing or two about drafting. I think this kid, I'm a Georgetown fan. I have been since Allen Iverson, and I was the kid in the stands being like, oh my God, he's amazing. Big John Thompson was one of my personal heroes, and anyone out of the Georgetown program I'm going to like, but I really like this guy. And I think that he's now in an organization that is going to, of course, has the perfect track record of developing him. He's going to be around other players close enough to his age that he can relate to them, but who obviously now have championship pedigrees and experience. I'm a huge, huge fan of this pick. I think he's gritty in the right ways, which is going to earn him a lot of points there. And I think they were lucky to get him. Not that they needed luck.
I like him a lot. I think he had a foot injury last year that cost him a lot of games.
Yep.
But he showed in a short period of time that he has a pretty complete game. And I thought it was telling.
Would you take him over Queen? Because he went 5 spots later than him, I think.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
am I doing my math right?
I'm just down on Queen. I'm just really down. I think it was only a
I
couple,
think
right?
Sorber's one of the best big men in the draft, if not the best big man in the draft.
It's kind of telling, too, that Oklahoma City, which really doesn't have a need for another young player in that mix, kept that pick, didn't kick the can down the road a little bit more, which I thought they might consider doing. Now they've got a guy that, and this is just theoretical, but they've got a guy like, you've got Isaiah Hartenstein potentially coming off the books in the summer of 2026.
Yes.
Maybe then Sorber is ready to step in and play that role on a cheaper contract. We talked about this last week, like the need for Oklahoma City to have low-cost replacements for their pricey mid-level type of salaries, and maybe that can turn out to be in it. I like it. Like Oklahoma City a year ago drafted Nikola Topic when he was out for the year, coming off a knee injury. Now they draft Sorber, who missed a chunk of time with that foot injury. I like the rolls of the dice that they're taking with these mid-first round picks.
Also, again, situation makes a huge difference. So whether a draft pick is worth more as just a future pick versus whether it's worth more if you have selected and developed the player, Oklahoma City has such a sterling reputation that has been earned on we identify talent, so if we picked him, he's good. And by the way, we're a great development program. So if we've started to develop him, he's good. And then he becomes a more valuable asset just for the fact that they're the ones who drafted him. So if down the road, Sam loves his flexibility, if down the road they want to make a trade with him in it as a promising young player, again, they have the ability to do that. So I'm very high on this. Go Georgetown, go Hoyas. That's all I have to say about that.
There you go. Yakachonis, Sorber, the two potential steals. And we'll revisit this in 5 years to see if either one of us turns out to be right. Couple things that have nothing to do with the draft I want to get your take on. We did not talk about the Kevin Durant trade last week. Kevin Durant going to the Houston Rockets in exchange for Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, the 10th overall pick that the Suns used on Malawach. I thought this was always the inevitable outcome. The Rockets just made too much sense. They needed a player like Kevin Durant. The loss of the Warriors in the first round showed that. San Antonio, to me, was never going to dig deep enough into its assets to go get Durant because they're preserving those assets for a bigger fish. They're waiting to see what Giannis...
Tall African fish?
Tall...
Greek?
Greek, Nigerian, playing up in Milwaukee right now. They're keeping their powder dry until then. And then, and you touched on this a moment ago, the teams around there that were interested, I mean, they weren't willing to go deep at all. You heard Miami, Miami's not going to part with Khalil Ware. Nice player, but could you imagine 3 years ago, Miami not parting with Khalil Ware to get Kevin Durant? Toronto was even better, Jakob Poeltl. Jakob Poeltl we're not parting with to get Kevin Durant.
I always wonder, and again, you cover the inner workings of this stuff more than I do. I always wonder, is it actually that they wouldn't give up Poeltl, or would it be that the entire package that included Poeltl was something they didn't
Probably
want?
more the latter.
Yes.
But the fact that Jakob Poeltl's name is even in this conversation is wild.
Well, look, again, and this is what I was saying about Miami, which is why I thought it was smart that they decided not to offer the store for Kevin Durant. These are teams, Toronto, Miami, that are not a Kevin Durant away.
Right.
And there is no point in trading for a 37-year-old who is expensive, who's only going to get more expensive because he's going to want an extension. There's no point in doing that if that's not your timeline. And the Rockets now are absolutely a championship contender. I don't know if they're going to win. I think the West is so loaded it's going to be hard to get out of the second round. But they are a possible Kevin Durant away from a title. If they are winning a title next year, if it happens, you and I are sitting here this exact week next year, and we're talking about the Rockets having won a title, it will be because they added Kevin Durant. And I thought they were so smart about the way they went about it. Obviously, this trade has been potentially talked about for, 6-8 months, maybe
it could have happened
longer.
in February if the Rockets wanted it to happen.
And they said, we want to see what Jalen Green can do. We want to see if we have enough offensive firepower. Guess what? They did not. Narrator, they did not. And then they were able to make this trade at a time when they didn't have a lot of competition. I think it's a knockout for them. I think that he is good for them in all the ways that they were missing, but I think they are very good for him too. I think that Ime Udoka is a brilliant coach who obviously has a prior relationship with him, who knows how to use him, knows how to maximize him, keep him invested and interested so he's not just sitting around watching other people, but uses his skills in the right way. I think that they are deep enough and maintained that depth through this trade, which was really an accomplishment, that he is not going to get physically taxed the way a 37-year-old should not get physically taxed. And I think that they retained so much of their defensive talent that he doesn't have to be one of the best defensive players on the floor anymore, which, by the way, he could be. There were times for this Phoenix Suns team that he was. But if he doesn't have to be at 37 years old, he can do it in the flashes he needs to, as opposed to he's got to be the one holding the fort. I just think that it's a great marriage, and as someone who has been a big Kevin Durant fan for a long time, I always say, is it possible for a guy that talented to be underrated? But I think he is. I'm thrilled to see him in the first team in a while where I can see from the outside, I see the fit 100% there. I think that's going to be a success.
Yeah, Kevin Durant is a level jump for the Rockets. And it makes them, I think, the number 2 team in the West, not in record, even though they were this year, but in terms of competing
threat
with the Oklahoma City Thunder. Like, if they had Kevin Durant in that series against Golden State, I think they would have won it.
Yep.
Losing Dillon Brooks hurts, not just his defense, but I think his toughness was big for that team in the locker room. I know Dillon kind of gets painted as a caricature, but his game and his intensity rubs off on guys. And certainly, I went down to Houston in March or April to sit with Amen Thompson for a while, and he talked about the influence of Dillon Brooks, like kind of being around a guy that had done it and played with that type of...
He's going to benefit from KD, though.
He's going to benefit greatly from KD. And that's part of the reason why I think losing Dillon Brooks doesn't hurt quite so much, because Amen Thompson will continue to take steps up. Tari Eason is still there. They've still got defenders. Now you've got Durant. You've got Van Vliet back on a better deal, I think, for the Rockets. Alperen Sengun's going to keep growing offensively.
Yep.
Like, they're well positioned to be pretty good. All right, last thing I want to hit you on is the topic that you want to get into the most. You want to talk about the Dallas Mavericks and the not necessarily the Mavericks roster. We know what that is. Cooper Flagg is back. Kyrie Irving is coming back. Anthony Davis is back as well. They've got a good front line. But it was an interesting presser from one Nico Harrison this week.
I just watched that press conference that was last night as we sit here, and I was just amazed at some of the pronouncements, both in the press conference and around it. First of all, there has been some rush now that the Mavericks have Cooper Flagg to say, this kid, he's going to contribute right away. They are championship contenders. Let me tell you, Kyrie Irving is not playing for that team for months into that season. So anybody who's sitting there and reeling off the roster, Kyrie, who, by the way, isn't even signed yet, although it sounds like perhaps he's on track for that.
He's agreed to something, yeah.
But
3 years, 100 and something. I think it's out there. Yeah, he's going to agree to it.
But he's not going to be part of that team on the floor.
Probably not till after the All-Star break.
For quite a little bit of the season. 2/3 of the season is what you're telling me right now. And I think there's just so much depth in the West that I am surprised to hear everybody making those pronouncements. And then was more surprised in the press conference when Nico Harrison laughed at somebody asking him about persistent rumors about Jason Kidd's possible interest in the New York Knicks, said, I thought I shut those rumors down, he said. And he
did
said,
not.
Jason Kidd will coach the Mavericks next year. And here is what I think about that. I think if Jason Kidd wants to coach the Mavericks next year, Jason Kidd will coach the Mavericks next year. If Jason Kidd decides that he likes money, he is the 10th highest paid coach in the league. He makes $8.5 million. Steve Kerr makes $17.5 million. James Dolan, as you pointed out weeks ago, can offer him, want to be the highest paid coach in the league? He can do it, no skin off his back. If Jason Kidd decides, I want to be back in New York, I want to be in the heart of it all. If Jason Kidd decides, I played in New York and I want to be able to go back there after I've done it in Dallas, now I want to go back there and do it in New York. If Jason Kidd decides, I can't trust ownership here anymore, so therefore I don't mind playing for that owner because who am I playing for here? If Jason Kidd has lost trust with people in the upward part of the organization, I don't know if any of those things are true. We do know that he's lost a raft of assistants. But if Jason Kidd decides any of those things and goes to the Mavericks and says, I don't want to be here, guess what? He will not be there because you cannot, in this league, operate with a head coach on a team that already has a delicate locker room, who does not want to be there, who is talking to the media every day and possibly transmitting that he doesn't want to be there, who is the key, the lifeline to Kyrie Irving, who doesn't want to be there. You can't have it. You just can't. So if I was the head of that team, and those rumors, as you point out, have not been put to rest, I would not be sitting up there making any kind of pronouncement until that first ball is dribbled on opening night of the season and the Knicks have another coach.
The assistant coaching stuff is fascinating. Sean Sweeney is like the closest thing Jason has to an organ, basically. Like he was
a kidney.
He was
a kidney. What are we talking
he was
here?
There with
a pancreas.
He was there with him as a video coordinator / assistant in Brooklyn. He goes with him in a bigger role to Milwaukee. He becomes his lead assistant in Dallas, and the Mavericks just kind of let him go. Like the Spurs came along. Sweeney did not have a contract after June 30th, does not have a contract after June 30th. The Spurs offer him a pay bump. They offer him a title bump. They offer him a chance to coach some great players. The Mavericks, from what I was told, put up no fight whatsoever. Like, had no issue losing Sean Sweeney. Jared Dudley, I think he's likely to be on the move. In part because I think Jared Dudley might be a little bit miffed that the Mavs brought in Jay Triano and he's going to be above him in the coaching ranks. Jared Dudley, you've probably heard some of the same things. Like, Jared Dudley is widely viewed as a future head coach.
Absolutely.
Like, Jared Dudley is considered...
And he's eager to be one. Wants to be on that track, wants to hit all the markers.
And where is he? He's coaching somewhere this summer. I'm blanking. He's doing some international stuff. But he's on that track. And to have Jay Triano, who's really not an experienced coach, come in and kind of leapfrog him, I don't think that sat well with Jared Dudley. There's been a lot of talk about God Shamgod, another guy close with Kyrie Irving, going to Orlando. So to have your assistant coaching staff gutted like that, that's not nothing. Like, these are vital parts of the Mavericks organization that they are going to have to replace. And maybe they can do it. Maybe there are assistants that Jason trusts and he wants to be there. But I'm with you. Like, I'm waiting to see what happens in mid-October when the Mavericks kick off their seasons. Jason Kidd working there on the bench. Who's working alongside him? To me, there are still a lot of questions about the Dallas Mavericks right now.
The rumors have not been put to rest. Let's just put it that way.
Look at the Knicks are out there talking to like Mike and Nori. Good coach. I said this in the last show and I still believe it. I don't think they're done pursuing Jason Kidd. And given everything we've seen with this coaching staff stuff, I don't know. I'm with that. Like, will we look back a month from now at that press conference that Nico Harrison gave and say, maybe you want to walk some of that back, maybe not be quite so definitive about how all that
it just depends on what Jason wants, and he could want to stay. I mean, and he could have believed in the Luka move, and we just didn't quite see it from his face during those press conferences, and maybe he's all on board. But if Jason Kidd wants out, if he is, I do not want to be here. You cannot have someone like that coaching your team.
And Jason Kidd's done that before?
Yes, he has.
He's done that before. All right, Rachel, you are on vacation next week. I'm going to stick around and be on the Al Horford watch, so don't worry.
You're so dedicated.
I will be manning the podcast for it.
Al Horford's a really good guy, but you don't care about that.
No, I don't. As long as you can put the ball in the hoop or stop people from putting the ball in the hoop, that is all I care about, Rachel Nichols.
Culture.